All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of America's least favorite podcast. We are we are joined this week by the one, the only, the elder statesman of the group, Dr. Wayne Cooper. Good to have you on the pod.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Returning behind a black screen is Cam Cooper as well, the young buck, as Wayne calls him.
Also known as Vince Crane.
Yeah. Maybe you should have dialed in as Vince, because apparently Vince is the only one who can work the visual function there. And Colin Hampton has decided to go start studying for next season's draft and will not be joining us this evening. So three-man booth for you. All right, well, let's dive in. We had 2 more weeks of regular season action that just concluded before the playoffs begin here. So we'll take a look at a recap of week 11 and week 12. Start out with a win that kept me alive for the playoff hunt momentarily over Rob. Big team performance. Dak did his thing. Really got good performance out of Olave, and really on down the line, a lot of double-digit performances. A few guys on Rob's team underperforming, like Garrett Wilson. Stephon Diggs still had a touchdown, but underperformed his expectations. And Dalvin, with just 7 points as well, was enough for me to turn the tide against Rob. Cam, you suffered a loss in week 11 here at the hands of Jason. Your thoughts on the defeat to Mr. Moody?
Yeah, I mean, this one was tough. This is one that I thought might end up doing me in Jason's favor as we approach week 12. This is one of those where every single one of his players, I guess the top half of his lineup really excelled. I mean, Devontae getting almost 30, Derek Carr getting 21, and then the bottom half of his roster did really well. So Justin Tucker and 49ers got 18 points combined. So one of those where I think I also fell to the median as well. And if I'd started no kicker and no defense, I might have fared a little bit better. Also tough seeing Wan'Dale Robinson on my bench with 15 points. So just tough. Thankfully, in the long run, didn't hurt me too much, but this one is one that I definitely want to have back.
Yeah. Fortunately, he had Jimmy G on the bench with 25 points, but still not enough to really turn the tide here for you. We had Eric with a big win over Willie. Eric continues to perform on the back of Justin Fields. Not a sentence I thought I would say at the beginning of the season. And Tony Pollard, really made the most of the time when Zeke was out with another 34-point performance in a losing effort for Willie's squad. Really the only player that Willie had do anything that week, other than Stevenson and Allen barely getting into double digits. It was pretty much just Pollard. Whereas a much more balanced performance from Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for a couple of weeks there, Willie was kind of taking advantage of the fact that he had some solid receiver work and he was getting some pretty solid running back work from guys who you wouldn't have expected to kind of carry the load, and Ramondre and Tony Pollard. Seems like they've come down to earth a little bit over the past couple of weeks, and his team has definitely also kind of returned or regressed to the mean. So kind of goes back to that rider tier running back conversation that we've had.
We lost him again. We'll keep rolling. This is live TV. He'll be back. I have no doubt about it. Mr. Cooper, any thoughts on the early matchups here?
This particular one or with Willie and Eric, or?
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of Willie's, poorest performances for the year, and Eric is always consistently, he's always in 3 digits. So it was just, he has Justin Fields, who I, by the way, drafted, and when I drafted him too, and then I waived him because he was horrible in the beginning of the year. Half of my original roster is like our stars on other teams, including Jamal Williams on your team. But yeah, I mean, Willie underperformed. I think that was his 6th straight loss in this game. So he was 12-6, and then he ended up at 12-12 after this.
Yeah. That's one way to back your way into the playoffs for sure.
Yes.
And then moving on to the next one here, we had the lowest scoring affair. This was the Thursday night football matchup for sure. Colin with a rare win, his second of the season, not against the median. That didn't end up coming to pass, but he did take down Johnny 3, caught him on an off week, helped out by 2 points from Kirk Cousins. And pretty much any other quarterback in the league would have been enough to give Johnny 3 a win this week against Colin. Not a lot of pretty performances. Kittle put up 20, Watson put up 19. The Washington defense really was the reason that Colin won. But pretty ugly performance all around. And Colin just had a slightly less ugly performance.
Yeah, Colin had, it looks like he 3/4 of his from his quarterback, his defense, and one of his receivers. And this is sort of like any given Sunday,
Yeah.
out of the 10 weeks, Johnny 3 would have beat Colin, but Johnny 3 had a negative score from his defense. So
yeah,
it was good to see Colin get a win.
it was.
And I was hoping for it because I was chasing Johnny 3 for a playoff spot, but it never happened.
Are we rejoined by Cam? Are you back? Looks like his box is there, but I don't. Oh, he's back again. We'll try and probably needs a new battery in his mic or something. We'll try and run an intern down to the field to switch out his mic pack.
We'll improvise. We're professionals.
That's right. Okay, so next we had Alex with a big win over Troy. Both quarterbacks overperforming their expectations. But really, Alex, with a few more guys down the roster, Montgomery, Mari Cooper, Kelsey with a 3-touchdown game was enough to swing this one. Despite only 3 points from the Buffalo defense and 18 from New England for Troy. So big win here for Alex this week.
No doubt, and he got all the points from his tight end. He is the tight end whisperer. So this week this was a good battle between two of the best teams in the league, and Alex won, and most of it was because of his tight end.
Yeah. And a lot of good performances on the bench, which is what makes this team so dangerous. Is he's got another tight end here, Johnson, who also put up double figures. So really, he kind of runs the 3 tight end set in our league for sure.
Prove him wrong, right?
That's right. And then a tough one, Mr. Cooper, for you, taking a loss against Josh in week 11. Not a lot of performance at the top of the roster. Well done by Latavius Murray, putting up 15 points. Speaking of people who were formerly on someone else's roster, he's a former roster mate of mine. But good to see him have a performance, and what a day by the kickers in this matchup. It was 20 points plus on both sides of the ledger.
Yeah, the kickers. This was probably my worst week. I mean, if you look at my bench, I don't think I had any. Maybe that I made a poor decision by other than the Cowboys D.
Right,
I don't think I had any points.
No,
decimated by injuries, but and I was playing the best team, the team that ended up in first place. So it was a tough loss, but it was expected.
I hear a third laughter. So
I have returned from the depths. No video still.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Any thoughts on this last matchup of week 11, Cam?
I just remember this is a week where my dad was battling injuries and buys and poor performances by some of his Foreman put up a dud. Mark Andrews not playing to what he normally does, so it's tough when you're playing somebody like Josh who all he needs is one of his 3 top 10 running backs to go off, and unfortunately 2 of them went off that day. So tough week.
Yeah, definitely. And then the most recent week to conclude, week 12, this was the final week of the regular season. I went into it needing a 2-0 week by myself and some help, and didn't get it. Went 0-2, unfortunately. Couple of roster decisions that would have, maybe gotten me over the median had I played different guys, but Lamar did his thing. And other than Damian having a bad game, it was really I was undone by 45 points from Jacobs, which we prepped for him all week, but they were who we thought they were, unfortunately, and had to play Josh's team twice, which may have been, it might have been the scheduling gods that kept me out of the playoffs this year, because having to play the number 1 seed twice was not doing me any favors. So
Yeah.
tough end to the regular season, and I'll slide into the toilet bowl.
Yeah, it's tough when somebody's dropping 45 points. There's not really much you can do to kind of battle that.
Yeah. Cam, you also took an L, although it was not enough to cost you a playoff spot. Playing Eric, team overperformed by a few points, but Eric's overperformed by a bit more. Your thoughts on the matchup with Eric?
Yeah, I sent a chat or a message in the group chat right after we got the weekly awards. This is just a week where Eric overperformed, and he also had one of the least efficient rosters as far as playing the right players on the bench. You're not gonna win many games playing teams like that, or playing against teams like that. So he just has a good all-around team. A team that, when we get into the standings here in a minute, you'll see he's the hottest team in the league right now, and he's got hitters all over his lineup. So not somebody I want to be on the same side of the playoff bracket with.
Yeah, and you look at his roster. I mean, several of them he didn't even draft. So he got Kenneth Walker later on. And he has Deebo Samuel, I think. Does he have him now?
Yeah,
he does.
And
Hawkinson.
He traded for Hawkinson, and he's the master of picking up the right play. Justin Fields he picked up on waivers, so he's a good GM.
Oh yeah, definitely in the running for GM of the year, no doubt.
Even with some questionable fab acquisitions of defenses, but that's neither here nor there.
Hey, it's it works. If it works, it works.
That's the strategy.
Colin could not make it back-to-back victories on the end of the season here. Another win for Alex over Colin. His team performed to expectation, but expectation was just 100 points. And that was not enough for a victory here. So Herbert with a big game, Murray also with a big game, and then down the line, just kind of too many wins when you compare head to head for Alex. So that was that was the difference.
Yeah. Alex is also sneaky good right now. We'll get into it, but he snuck into the 3rd seed in the playoffs. I don't think he's a team that a lot of folks are talking about, but he's quietly got it done all year. And obviously Kelsey on his team has been a huge cornerstone. And playing Colin in week 12 is a little bit of a cupcake, but Alex is getting done pretty quietly.
Yeah. Mr. Cooper, you did get a win, a narrow one, but a victory over Rob here in the final week of the season. Your thoughts on the big victory?
It was a defensive affair. Nobody scored over 85 points. And Rob had a bad week. I got lucky by, Foreman, some of the running backs I ended up picking up on waivers. Latavius Murray and Foreman did okay. And I was just lucky because Rob had an off week. He had several of his players didn't get to, I think he only had 2 players or score over double digits. So it was just one of those weeks where he had an off week, and I had a very, very average week, and I barely beat him. I was worried at the night game where I think I had Alan Lazard, and I was, I could have benched him and won without any, but I was going to try to, I thought I had a chance against the median, which was foolish because it was 30 points higher. But All I needed was Lazard to have a fumble, and then I would have lost. So, but made watching the game, it made it, kept me up watching the rest of that game.
Yeah, and as a Packers fan, a Lazard fumble would be par for the course for us this year. So,
Yeah.
fortunately, you escaped with that victory.
Although your quarterback in waiting has looked pretty good at the end of that game.
Yeah, we'll see if he ever gets to play.
Yeah.
Who knows? We might just continue to trot 3/4 of Aaron Rodgers out there, and call it a day.
We'll see if he gets to play. Sounds like something that they said when Brett Favre was still around and Aaron Rodgers was kind of the man in waiting. If you guys back into 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, that would just might be something else.
Yeah, then I would stop cursing about us using another first-round draft pick on a non-skill position player if he turns out to be as good as Aaron has been. Back to the fantasy football, we've got a win for Johnny over Troy. Kirk Cousins, I really questioned Johnny in the draft, waiting super late to take a quarterback and then going with Kirk Cousins as his QB1, but he's been a fine quarterback. I mean, he's been, just around the top 10 for the season. So that strategy, really paid off for Johnny and allowed him to get a lot of other skill position guys that he probably otherwise wouldn't have if he had taken a quarterback or 2 earlier. So just, a note as we look back, over the regular season, that a strategy that really did pay off here.
Yeah. And I mean, look at another team like Eric's team, who's at one point was streaming Justin Fields at quarterback. It really goes to show you that some strategies where you just go 0 QB could really help you. I mean, Eric ended up drafting Justin Herbert at some point, but just strategies that we thought we questioned at first and that paying off.
Yep.
Yeah, he was patient with Hopkins, right? Waited for him to come back, and Jeff Wilson, he made a good trade for Jeff Wilson, and then that was a game. Troy had Paris Campbell for the Colts, so he only needed 9 points from him that night to maybe pull out the victory, but also looked very, very bad against the Pittsburgh Steelers that night. So they had half of offense. Troy could have pulled this one out.
Yeah. I was hoping that I would similarly stash a guy in Deshaun Watson who could help me in a playoff run, and looks like he might help me avoid the ACT if anything, but strategy worked out a little better for Johnny. And last but not least, we had another narrow victory here, Jason over Willie. Both teams overperforming their pre-week expectations on the backs of strong performances from their quarterbacks. Mike Williams did not end up playing for Willie, and that might be the difference here. He got nothing out of Higbee, although he played. If he had a different wide receiver in there instead of Mike Williams, he probably gets a dub.
Yeah. Willie's kind of been riding that Mike Williams train ever since he traded with Troy for Tyler Boyd. I think he's kind of waiting for Mike Williams to pop off. It could end up being a good trade if he picks it up in the playoffs. Obviously, he definitely wants this game back, especially now that where he's seeded in the playoffs. A win in this position could have vaulted him to the 6th seed. Now he's at the 8th seed. So, definitely wants this game back as just a 5-point loss here, less than that, 4-point loss. Yeah, Jason played a little bit of spoiler, even though Willie was still fair and square in the playoffs.
Yeah, and Willie lost his last 6. He was 12-6. Now he's 12-12. And Jason won his last 5. He came up just a tiny bit short, but these are 2 teams going in the opposite direction at the end of the year. Although Willie made the playoffs and Jason barely missed it.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see whether Willie's able to turn it around, or if he, takes the first exit sign out of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, that concludes week 12, and we've got playoffs on the horizon. I wonder if there's a way on this screen to show the playoff bracket.
Mm,
I don't know if there is.
There might not be, but we could probably walk through.
Yeah. We've at least got the standings.
Yeah. Oh, click on the top right. See where? Yeah.
Oh, nice. There we
Nice.
go.
Cool.
Sweet. So yes, playoffs begin this week. 8-man playoff field here. So we've got our top seeds. Let's also transition into shine or shade here. We'll ask questions as to whether you think something is likely or unlikely to happen. So I've got one to kind of kick it off. If you look at the top half of the bracket versus the bottom half of the bracket, shine or shade, your champion comes from the bottom half of this bracket.
I'm gonna shade that. I was actually having a side conversation with Josh earlier today. I think that the top half of the bracket is stronger. That first round game between Troy and Johnny particularly is a interesting matchup. I think that between Josh and Troy and Johnny, I think the champion is within one of those three teams. Granted, I think Eric is probably the strongest team in the field right now. I think if you ask me to predict my championship game right now, it probably is Eric versus the winner of that Troy versus Johnny game. But I'm going to shade it. I think the champion comes from up top.
Mr. Cooper, you think it's coming from the top half or the bottom half of the bracket?
I think it's coming from the bottom half of the bracket. Between Alex, I think Alex will move on, and Eric, and then I think both of them. Yeah, and then whoever wins between them will be the champion. That's just my thought. I think the bottom half is the strongest.
I agree. I feel like team for team or pound for pound, the top half is probably stronger than the bottom half, but the team that I would least want to play in week 17 and 18 is Eric's team. I just think he has the most depth. I mean, you still got to survive 4 more weeks of guys potentially getting injured. I really feel like if I had to put my chips on someone to run the table, it would be Eric, just on the back of how strong his team is top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One thing I will note is Eric or Justin Fields has a bye week 14. Now I believe he has the firepower to make it up at other skill positions during the 2-week playoff, but just something to note that he won't have Justin Fields, pretty critical part of his offense for that second part of the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think he mentioned he's got a handful of guys. I do too. Not that it really matters because I'm not in the field, but a handful of guys with week 14 buys. So that's a good point. That maybe if he gets tripped up anywhere, it could be in the first round matchup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is each round of the playoffs 2 weeks?
It is.
It is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something to, if you're a player on a good team that you might sit, for the last couple of weeks.
Yep.
So that's always.
Yeah. That waiver wire for week 17, between week 17 and week 18 will be interesting to see what kind of players folks pick up when people like Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes are probably sitting for their last final games.
Right.
Do you guys want to quickly kind of on the back of the napkin run through y'all's projections for the playoffs?
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead. Take a lead.
I'll go first. So I think up top, I think I have Josh moving on in game 1, and I have Johnny moving on in game 2. I have Alex moving on, unfortunately, against me in game 1, and Eric prevailing against better by judgment in round 2. Then we got Josh and Johnny. I think that's going to be one of the better games of the season. Probably the 2 most potent offenses so far. I think the final is going to end up being Josh and Eric. I think Eric beats Alex, and I think Johnny beats Josh. And then it's got to be a toss-up there, but it's close. I'm gonna take Johnny, but it's close.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
All right, I will. I'll take Josh in that first game just because Willie's lost 6 in a row, so he's going in the wrong direction, and Josh has a deep lineup. And then I'll take Troy over Johnny 3 just because Troy's got the talent. If they all hit on the same week, he could score 180 points. You know, he's got the guys on the team. It's just sometimes they don't show up. And then I'm going to take Alex over Cameron just because Alex has a very, very strong squad. And then I'll take Eric because I think Eric is a team to beat. And then up top, so I'll take I'm going to take Josh over Troy
Wow.
to go to the championship game, and then I'll take Eric over Alex, and then I'll take Eric as the champion.
I like it. I've got a pretty similar looking bracket to Mr. Cooper's there. I've got Josh and Troy moving on in the first round. I've got Cam pulling the upset over Alex, and Eric. I'm gonna make it a clean sweep in the prediction column here. And then I've got Eric advancing from round 2 as well, and Josh. And I have Eric pulling out a championship victory over Josh.
Okay.
Wow.
Very similar.
Now, the more important part of the bracket, to avoid having to take standardized tests, we have a 2-round matchup here between, we'll lovingly call him the 12 seed, also known as last place, Skip, against Jason, and then 2 of the hosts of this podcast this week, myself against Dr. Wayne. Cam, your predictions for the toilet bowl.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you got to pick who's going to lose that moves on to the next round. It's tough. I feel like just based off of some of the moves that I've seen being made by Colin this week, I feel like the team that loses this is probably the team that cares the least. And unfortunately, at this point, I think it's probably Jason. He's checked out the most out of the 4 remaining teams. So I'm going to say Jason loses that first round. And then between Nick and my dad, I'm looking at some of the standings here. I'm going to have to go with my dad moving on to the last place game, just because I think he's still struggling with some injuries, and trying to put the pieces together with some folks who are on bye, and it's hard when you're at this point in the season, you can't make trades or anything. So I'm going to move on with Jason and my dad for the last place game. Ultimately, Jason losing or taking home the ACT ability to play. So yeah, I think Jason is the ultimate loser here.
Okay, I will take in the top game. Jason's on a hot streak. He's got the Raiders, and the Raiders are, they had that big win this past week, so I think they're going to start putting up some points. But I'll take Jason's going to beat Colin, so Colin will go to the toilet bowl, and then I'm going to have some confidence in myself, so I'm going to have to say I'm going to beat Nick. So it's going to be Nick and Colin in the toilet bowl, and I think Nick is going to win, and Colin will have to take the ACT.
I actually have the same exact prediction that you do, Mr. Cooper. And largely, I think I will probably be beating you after week 13, but I have a lot. I'm probably going to be rolling out multiple tight ends week 14 because I just don't have a lot of skill position guys who avoid week 14 buys. I think I'm going to have like 4 guys on week 14 buys who would be regular starters. So it could be a scrappy week for me. And I'm really hoping to build up some cushion this week so that I'm sweating a little bit less in week 14. But if we're, near one another, or if you've got a lead heading into the second week, I think you're going to beat me. And so then I've got myself against Colin. I know he's made some moves and he's probably taking it more seriously than Jason, but I think it still might be too late for his roster. And so I'm going to say that I defeat Colin and Colin takes the ACT. So I wanted to do one other segment here. It is World Cup time. We're heading towards the knockout stages of the World Cup, just as we're heading towards the knockout stages of our league. Any particular teams that remind you of World Cup teams, and why they might remind you of a World Cup team? Any thoughts on that?
I actually, when you sent me that little note, I went World Cup and I attached a country to each team.
Perfect. I will do the same. You lead off, and I'll tell you who I was thinking for each team.
Okay, so I for Johnny 3, I since he's the defending champ, he's France, right? I mean, he's the defending champ in the World Cup. So Johnny 3's France. He's not in the top of our league, but since he's the defending champ. And then I separated the teams into 3 sections: blue bloods, and then 3 solid teams with the potential to win it all. And then, I think 4 teams that are just happy to be there. So I got Josh, the top dog, and the odds on, he's number one team. So he's Brazil. And then the other 3 blue bloods are, so we got Josh, Eric, Troy, and Alex are the blue bloods. And so Josh is Brazil, Eric is Spain. He scores a ton. I think Spain's got, 8 goals in 2 games. They did have a draw, but they're a solid team. And Troy is Argentina. They got some great players. Sometimes those great players don't show up all the time. So he can certainly win it all. In fact, I picked Argentina to win it all in our little side thing that Cameron put together. And then Alex is Portugal. They've won both teams. They've got 6 points. They've only played 2 games. Out of the toughest group, I think, in the World Cup. They can score a lot. They got Ronaldo. They don't have any tight ends, but they got Ronaldo. And then the 3 solid teams with potential is Cameron. He's Belgium because he's sort of just hanging out down there in sort of a remote group, a good group, a close group. I don't think anybody has more than 4 points in the Belgium group. So, and he could actually make some noise in the playoffs, just like Belgium may in the World Cup. Willie's the USA because he came in as an underdog, right? And he surprised everybody. And he's doing pretty good. He's competing with the big boys, although he's had a tough time going recently. And then Rob is the last of the 3 solid teams. He's England, solid lineup that can make a deep run. Rob needs to play the right guys. Like he missed out on a ton of points with Taysom Hill, right? So Rob's England. And then the happy to be there is Nick. You're Ghana.
I like it,
effort, but you may fall just short of the playoffs, right? So, but you got a bright future, right? And Jason is Germany because he's been a traditional power in this league, but sort of having a tough year, right? And Germany may not even make it to the knockout round. Who knows? They may. I'm Mexico because I barely missed the playoffs, just like Mexico missed it today. I actually missed it by more than Mexico missed it, but I couldn't score any points. Just Mexico, they had 2 goals in 3 games, so they shouldn't move ahead. And then Sir Colin is not Cutter because he's the commissioner. They're the host, and they don't win. He doesn't have any talent, and Qatar doesn't have any talent.
I like it.
Yeah, you hit a lot of those on the head. Those are great.
Do they match any of yours, Nick? Or
A few of them do. I'll spin through mine. So I'll go kind of top to bottom on the screen here. Josh, I've got Josh as Poland. He doesn't give up a lot of points, and Poland's been pretty stout defensively as well. A couple goals given up today, although they still performed really well, and Szczesny made a ton of saves. So hard to score against Josh for whatever reason, and hard to score against Poland. Willie, I've got Willie as the USA as well, for the largely the same reasons as you did, Mr. Cooper. Troy, I've got him down as Portugal. He's got a lot of sexy pieces on the team. You're not really sure what to make of them. He's got a lot of the bangles, and they remind me of Ronaldo. Johnny, I've got him as Denmark. Denmark didn't have a great World Cup, but they, made it to the semifinals of the Euros recently. And Johnny just, when I look at his roster, it feels like he's greater than the sum of the pieces. And that's the way I feel about Denmark's roster is, they seem to overachieve in major tournaments despite not having like a lot of household names or a lot of guys that you might expect a lot from. Alex, I've got him as Croatia. He's got a lot of like stout pieces, a lot of guys who have been around, a lot of tight ends, and those remind me of the Croatian players. Cam, I've got you as Australia here. You're kind of a team that's up and coming, a team that's got a lot of talent, a lot of guys who go underappreciated, squeaked into the playoffs, just like Australia squeaked into the round of 16. For Eric, I've got him down as Brazil. I think he's the favorite, just as I would make Brazil the favorite in that matchup. Rob, I've got Rob down as England. A lot of really good players, and you're just not really sure whether he's going to be able to get the job done on any given Sunday, just as England, seems to from time to time put up a dud of a performance. Moving down to the toilet bowl teams, I similarly have Colin as Qatar, the host nation, the commissioner of the podcast, commissioner of the league. You think maybe he paid someone to get that position, just as the Qataris did. Jason was a tricky one for me. I think I'm going to go with Costa Rica for Jason. A team that kind of seemed checked out at times, maybe not totally focused, just as Costa Rica was in their matchup against Spain, getting the doors blown off of them there. For myself, I have to go with the Germans, a team that not only because I root for them, but a team that came into the season with some promise and some expectations and underperformed, through inexplicable means. And then for Mr. Cooper, I got to go with the Swiss for you. They're just a team that, they're you don't want to play them. You don't really know how they make the World Cup, but they're, constantly there. And, they're constantly a tricky opponent, sometimes above the line and sometimes below the line. The other one I had potentially for you, Mr. Cooper, was Iran, because they're the oldest team in the tournament, and you're the elder statesman of our league. So alternate choice, the Iranians.
I like it.
Cam, any World Cup doppelgangers for you?
I feel like I align with a couple of the ones you guys both said. I think if I was to switch any of the ones that my dad had said, I would make Eric probably Brazil, just because they seem to be a super high potent offense. But besides that, I mean, you guys did, that was great. That was awesome.
Any other, anything else you want to touch on here on this week's podcast, or thoughts as we head into the playoffs?
I wanted to quickly just share the standings, particularly as we kind of change between week 10 and week 12, because week 12 is actually pretty important as it relates to movement of teams. So let me just share this real quick to kind of show you how the landscape of the field changed between week 10 and week 12 when we last met. So week 10, we kind of had a couple folks. We had, some familiar faces up top: Troy, Josh, Eric, and Rob, and Willie in the 5 seed. We see Rob and Willie kind of on 2 slides, moving down to the 7 and 8 seed just over the course of 2 weeks. And Josh ascending the throne, Eric making a run to the 2nd seed, and then Alex actually is the big mover on moving from the 7 seed in week 10 to the 3 seed in week 12. So I thought that was kind of interesting as we, see these folks move around. I think something that maybe was an unintended consequence of Troy losing a couple of these games, and also Rob losing a couple of these games, is Troy has to face Johnny in round 1, which I don't know if anybody wants to have to do. And then Rob, unfortunately, has to face Eric in round 1. So situation where maybe they weren't playing each other before. Now looks a little bit more dire as we approach the actual playoffs. So just a couple of big movers and shakers, winners and losers between these two teams.
Cam, have you been able to figure out why my team sucked? That's what I want. I want to find that somewhere in the data.
I want to take a look to see. You mentioned this on a couple podcasts ago. You want to see who was the closest median loser throughout the season, because you could see pretty much between seeds 1 through 12, it was a 2 or 3 game difference, and then obviously down here is a little bit less so, particularly Colin, the goose egg. I want to take a deeper look into that too, because I know a lot of folks have come to the median this year in a couple of close fashions, but I want to see. I'll take a deeper look in that on a future podcast, and I'll reveal my findings.
Sounds good. Yeah, it's I outscored a handful of the teams ahead of me and had the second fewest points against, and somehow wound up 6 games under 500, which blows my mind. But other than the fact that like I seemingly scored half my points for the season in 2 weeks, where I finished in first place, and then the rest of the time was like under the median, just got way too hot a couple weeks and then way too cold the rest of the season. But we'll be analyzing that all off season, and we'll be ready to rock by the time preseason training camp comes around.
Bulletin board material.
It looks like Colin ended up scoring 1,000 points. That was a subject of the last
Yes.
the last pod. He broke the 1,000-point barrier.
He did. On another previous one, there was a Shiner Shade. Will Colin eventually beat the median? And I said he would. So I got that one wrong. But I'm looking forward. On our last podcast of the season, I'm going to go back and put together a montage of some of our best and worst predictions throughout the season. So that's a good point. That was one that we talked about last week, and it seemed doable for him, and he cleared it by 25 points. So with some room to spare.
Yeah, he got better as the year went on.
Yeah. He also unfortunately had the leakiest defense by like a decent margin against everyone except for Troy. So he gave up more than 400 points more than he scored. So tough.
And for somebody who drafted 3 defenses, you gotta be asking some questions about the front office at that point.
We also at some point we had a question as to whether anyone would end the season with 90 fab or more. And fortunately, nobody did. People ended up using their fabs. I think 75 is the most fab, and that's Willie that someone has remaining.
And he dropped that 25 on Odell.
Right.
So he very well could have ended the season with 100 fab. Yeah. I think there's another one where we did an over under on total wins or losses at 17. And I think the line was maybe 2.5 or 1.5. And if I recall correctly, I think Colin, Nick, and I did press the over on that at 17, 17.5, I would say. Might have been 16.5, but only one team got over 17 wins or more. Which is surprising.
Yeah, parity was definitely the theme throughout the league. I mean, I went into the final week of the season with a chance to even finish 7th, and finished all the way down in 11th. So that tells you, we had the playoff spots were just 500. So it was definitely a very balanced league, top to bottom.
Yeah.
Well, anything else, or should we bid ourselves adieu?
All good.
I'm good.
All right. Good luck out there to those who are competing for more than avoiding the ACT.
And good luck to you two who face each other in the first round.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
You and me for the next 2 weeks, Nick.
It'll be a fun one.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Cool, y'all.
All right. Thanks a lot.